This episode of Warp 5 is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the non-profit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join in on the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode or any other, please join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's B-A-B-E-L, into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
This is David A. Goodman, writer and consulting producer for Star Trek Enterprise, and you're listening to Warp 5 on Trek FM.
How we doing, Trip? Ready when you are. Prepare for warp.
Course laid in, sir. Request permission to get underway. Let's go.
Welcome, Boomers, to another episode of Warp 5. I'm your host, Brandon-Shea Mutala, and joining me, as always, is the evil Patrick, who likes putting me into the agony booth of this podcast.
I thought the podcast was the agony booth.
It is, and I gotta...
Like, just in general, just making you come on here was enough.
No, it's just hearing your voice is what is the agony that
Which
I
is
get.
why I try and talk as much as possible.
Well, we are excited. We are finishing up, finally, our retrospective series. You know, Patrick, I don't know if you realize this, so I've been on Warp 5 now for 3 years, and when I started, they were still in Season 2 of the retrospective. So we've been doing this series of podcasts for almost 4 years now.
Yeah, it's been a long time, because when I started, which is a little over it's got to be almost 2 now, right? 2 years?
Year and a half about, yep.
Yeah, I first came in doing the very beginning of Season 3.
Yeah. So for a year, it took us a year and a half to finish her up, but I'm glad that we did it the way that we did, because there was a lot to go through for these ones here. So I'm very happy with how this series of episodes went, and I'm glad to finally wrap it up. And last year at Vegas, I actually had the pleasure of meeting in person one of the great Star Trek authors, co-authors of many novels with Dayton Ward, and many short stories as well, including, if I remember correctly, one on Eric's.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, we've got the wonderful Kevin Dilmore of Hallmark. Thank you so much for joining us, Kevin.
Oh, well, thank you. No, this is, I'd say it was a treat, but then I watched the episodes we're going to talk about. No.
Oh, yes.
That's horrible. No,
I like all of these ones in a certain way.
Yeah,
So
it's like everything else. It's, sometimes you got to really search for the things to love.
Wait a second. Did you just say you like all of these in a certain way?
I do.
Okay, Brandon, then I'm the one in the agonizer booth at the moment.
I'm happy to share what the glimpses of little things that I like about each one of those. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
You got to remember that I co-wrote a sequel to one of these.
Yes, I know. So, and which I do really love the extended lit verse and what they did with those books. I think it was absolutely brilliant. So
thank you.
I think those books.
You're kind to say.
Many of them fixed a lot of issues. So
I'll have to, when we're done, remind me, and I'll turn my computer. I don't want to do it right now, but I've got all my novels right over here. And you also, if we remember correctly, you guys also were I believe, the first people to actually write an Enterprise scene for a book. Am I right?
Ooh, you know what? That's a great question. I don't know that that's true, but throw it to the audience. I mean, I don't know that I thought of that as thought of that having that distinction.
Because you guys wrote the scene in A Time To.
You're absolutely correct. My brain was thinking that, are you saying Age of the Empress was the first? No, you're not. We wrote Enterprise into our Time To books.
Yeah, so it's tight on the timeline. The other option for maybe would be the prologue for DeCandido's Badlands duology?
It's possible. I think we beat him to press, but you may be right because we intentionally worked that in, and plus the fact we also we may be the first people, if nothing else, to use a denobulin in print, because we had a denobulin medical officer in our books as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, right on. Excellent.
Named after the pediatrician and obstetrician that brought me into the world, believe it or not.
Trop?
Yeah, Trope. Dr. Trope was the guy who slapped my butt and called me done.
Yes. Well, this is not the novel podcast. We have another one for
that. And nobody wants to talk about butt slapping on here.
You'd be surprised.
The Star Trek Litverse is what kept my fandom alive after Enterprise went off the air, was reading the novels.
Well, I'm glad. It certainly kept me going. I absolutely was a fan reading these before I ever thought I'd have a chance to write one. So, I'm right there with you.
Excellent. Before we get into the episodes, though, right now,
yep.
Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your work with Hallmark? Because you're always at Vegas every year talking about Hallmark, and you guys always have a special Star Trek ornament that comes out every year. And last year, you guys had Maurice and Eric's as a cool piece. Yeah,
we did. Yeah, that was actually one of the one of our lesser selling ornaments. It was all my idea, so I'm happy to say, yeah, that one didn't make it so as popular.
Well, I have one. I was the one that bought one.
You know what? I bought one too.
So we sold at least three.
Sold at least three.
Right
no,
here.
we did. They did fine. They just didn't blow out the door like we hoped. Yeah, that was actually. I'm pretty. There was 4 or 5 Star Trek ornaments over the last 14 years that I've been with Hallmark that I will say I've been very proud to be associated with. And I am not on the keepsakes team. I am a liaison for the keepsakes team for the Hallmark writing studio. But I've been advising them on Star Trek stuff almost since I got into the building in 2005, because I found out that I was not only as a big fan, but connected professionally. And so I got to jump in on brainstorms and things like that. So at Vegas this year, we announced what we're doing next year for Star Trek, which is a series we're calling Star Trek Storytellers. It's going to have 7 ornaments plus a tree topper over the course of the next 3 years, 2020, 21, and 22. And by the end of it, when you plug all the ornaments in a string, you're going to get about 10 minutes of Mirror Mirror. And each of the episodes is going to be a figural character of the Enterprise crew in their Terran Empire outfits. So I'm very excited to be doing that. I can tell you that I've heard some segments of that episode. I've been working on it for a year, and I've probably watched that episode more than I have any other Star Trek in the last 12 months, and I think I can recite it in my sleep. But very excited to bring that project to life.
Awesome. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I asked you in Vegas because it was a good answer, and I'm sure that there are Hallmark ornament fans that...
I hope I can remember it. Was I sober?
You were definitely sober.
Okay, I'll try to remember the answer then. So
the question was, why did you guys switch from being able to plug the ornaments into the light bulb socket to batteries?
Oh, well, that's actually... and that's not a Star Trek question. That's more of just a... technology, onward into the future question. The number one reason is that we're able to make the sculpts more screen accurate, because the battery power is a different type of approval process than when you're using something straight from the wall. Underwriter's laboratory has to get involved, and sometimes the things that we would have to do for that level of current coming in makes things less screen accurate. But the other reason is that nowadays, as trees go more and more into the LEDs, not only are the sockets wrong, but they don't have nearly the power that you need to power even one of those ornaments. you could cram that in there or make some sort of adapter or whatever to get into an LED string, but the whole tree would dim. And I don't even know if you'd have enough power to do an ornament. That's how bright those bulbs are and how little juice they actually use. So but now the Star Trek storyteller set that I talked about that's coming out next year, that will have a separate string of light, string that connects to the wall, and those will be a constant on, at least with the light.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, because that was one question that I had for you, because I had actually just started collecting the ornaments.
Mm-hmm.
A good friend of mine, sent me a bunch of them, and I'd never seen them before, really. Honestly, the first ones that I bought were the 50th anniversary.
Oh, nice.
The Gold Enterprise.
Yep.
And I think it was the Salt Vampire one.
Yes.
And maybe it was just the two that year. Was there a third one?
Well, yeah, actually what there was that year was also our tabletop. It was
I did get that one. Yeah,
the Kirksbach and McCoy on the bridge kind of a scene. But we went with the 50th golden anniversary sculpt of the 1964 shooting model, which you can see has the bigger bridge dome, the larger deflector dish, the spikes on the front of the nacelles. But that's based on the model that was delivered to Desilu in December of 1964, and then Mantrap because that was the first episode that aired.
Did they have that? Was that also the year they did the Beyond, or was that the next year?
Star
the
Trek
ship from Beyond.
Star Trek Beyond. Yeah, you know what? Now we have not done the. At least I don't think we've done the Enterprise from that film, but it was released in 2016 because that was their 50th anniversary kind of love letter to fans.
Okay. Awesome.
So you never thought to ask an electrician who teaches transformers and electrical circuits why the stringer was different?
No, I thought I was with him in Vegas, and I just thought I'd go to the source. So
yeah, you would actually blow up it's likely that you could blow up the tree.
Yeah,
LEDs.
My goal when I did the Star Trek Storytellers, I did kind of take that whole episode and trim it down to 10 minutes. But my original draft, I actually did have I assume you've ordered the full duration. And have Chekhov screaming from his ornament, and basically kind of flashing. Because I thought nothing says Christmas like that. How many of us go home for Christmas and think we have stepped into the agony booth? That's what I want to know.
Well, one last Christmas then thing for this. Look, we've gone on a tangent for ornaments, but that's fine.
I'm sorry.
We didn't even get 15 minutes in.
No, this is me. I love this stuff because now I'm collecting ornaments, so it's great. But did you guys realize, because now it's a meme everywhere, that the Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan one that you did was about a Jew that came back from the dead to the joy of everybody? Because your Star Trek II one was the...
that's true. I hadn't thought about that, but dang it, that's if that's the way people want to embrace that ornament, then by all means. I think. Now I will say there's a little bit of a bittersweetness to that, as you can imagine. There were people who have no idea that it takes 18 months or so from start to finish to get an ornament in stores. Thought that it was like we were kind of sneaking something in to the store, ill-timed or morbidly timed with Mr. Nimoy's passing. But he personally approved any of the Star Trek products that we did that involved his likeness or his voice, and that ornament was the final approval we received personally from him before he passed. So that was for the people who were quick to jump on the internet bandwagon to call us insensitive, I kind of like, Mr. Nimoy was well aware of his condition and gave his 100% approval to that ornament, for us to move forward with it. So, that's all I got.
Yeah. The internet tends to jump on people for things pretty darn quick, which I will be addressing in tonight's podcast.
Yes, we will.
As we jump into our discussion, what a great transition. We're going to be finishing up our retrospective series tonight. We're going to be talking about the 2-part Irmeric Darkly, which ties into the ornaments. And we'll be talking about Demons and Terra Prime. And we will also
And that's it. And the season ended.
And then my table cut out the rest of
that last episode is for Earl Grey. That's it. We're done.
No. See, now you ruined my joke, Patrick. You ruined my joke.
I got a feeling we'll have plenty more jokes.
We got one or two more. I was going to say, I popped in my Blu-ray and I found 42 minutes of deleted scenes from the Pegasus on my Enterprise. So,
nice.
Awesome. Anyways, why don't we jump into In a Mirror Darkly? So, Kevin, when I actually approached you in Vegas to ask if you wanted to be on our show, you specifically said, I want to be on to talk about In a Mirror Darkly.
I did.
So let's talk about that. Why? First of all, let's start there. Why did you want to jump on for these ones?
Well, I mean, as again, evidenced by what we'd already been talking about, the Terran Empire in the Mirror Universe has always been intriguing to me. Dave and I had the opportunity. Really, we were very flattered to be asked to take Mike Sussman's proposal for a 2-part episode that would have been in the 5th season of Enterprise had it continued, to continue the story of Empress Sato. And so that is just something that was just a little bit near and dear to my heart. Rewatching, and I know we rewatched it a couple of times just to kind of get a feel for those characters, because we didn't write the original Enterprise characters. It wasn't like the original series episode where you kind of get a flavor of both. I mean, these are the 100% the portrayals of these characters, as they appear in, for the Terran Empire. And so just kind of get a feel for it, we rewatched that episode a couple of times. So there were things I'd forgotten. I just don't think about the fact that that episode is 14 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't realize that script had come from an idea from the season 5. Like, I've got that anthology.
If you look in the Glass Empire's anthology, when you look up, it says story by Mike Sussman, and
okay,
which is absolutely true. He didn't have a script; he had a treatment, already written up to propose a 2-parter that laid everything out. And we talked quite a bit with Mike during the process. In fact, and actually, he sat with me on a panel. In Vegas, I think it was Vegas. It might have been San Diego around the time that came out. So he was really supportive of our taking his ideas and turning them into a different medium, medium that he hadn't worked in before.
Cool, excellent.
Awesome.
Patrick, now let me ask you, because you watched these episodes live.
Yes.
What were your initial impressions when these came on? Were you aware that these episodes were coming, or were they a complete surprise to you when they aired?
So I never watched anything with any TV show. I never watched Coming Up Next or read the TV guide to find out information or even look up the names of episodes. So I had no idea that a Mirror Universe episode was coming when these finally hit. And one of the things I liked the most about it was jarring at first, the very beginning, but more importantly, they changed the whole entrance credits to fit as if. So now, instead of just the show taking place in the Mirror Universe, you kind of had the feeling like you were in the Mirror Universe watching just a regular TV show in the Mirror Universe.
That was my favorite part of the first time. I watched it live too, and that when they changed the credits, and I had a different theme song, and I thought, okay, this would be what it would feel like if there was a Terran Empire TV series. Now, I felt exactly the way you did.
Right, and I thought that was ingenious. I mean, I loved the entrance. I don't like people maiming and blowing people up, but it's TV. I mean, so I like that they changed it that way. They didn't just pass it off as just another episode. It just so happens that it takes place in the Mirror Universe. And, this is the first time that they did it where, I believe, right, where it just takes place entirely in the Mirror Universe. So it's not like our crew is going there. Mm-hmm. So there's no reason for it to actually be connected to our show in the title credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I liked. There's a few things that I didn't agree with necessarily in the story. Like, I don't believe that Phlox and T'Pol would still be on the ship if this was the Mirror Universe. I just don't believe that you take anyone from this universe, put them in that universe, and they automatically just become a bad version of themselves on the same ship. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think I think Manny Cotto came up with the story and Mike wrote the script for these, if I remember correctly. And I wondered if it was one of those deals where they weren't necessarily looking at this as a prequel to the original series. They were looking at this as a logical prequel to every mirror universe and all of them. And I think they wanted to have the Terrans enslave races. Mm-hmm. So when you are watching the episodes from Deep Space Nine and the Terrans themselves are enslaved, I think they wanted kind of this, like, well, you did it to us, so we're going to do it to you, kind of, backward, retcon or something.
Yeah.
I understand why. And look, to be honest, if they didn't add T'Pol and Phlox, I'd probably be sitting here complaining that where are they in the episode, but it just would have seemed more, I don't know, it would have seemed more natural that just Terrans would be on the ship.
Yeah, I think that's fair, especially given the fact that Spock in no way, shape, or form are we led to believe that he is enslaved or a lesser person, or a lesser valued being, like they hammered into us that T'Pol was.
Mm-hmm. Right, and even Phlox, but Phlox was more accepted because he was more complicit with being there.
Yes.
He was happy to be there. And I don't know, would Denoblians just become really bad all of a sudden?
Good question.
I don't know. Because the whole idea is that the one thing that changed in the mirror universe was that the human beings were awful.
Yes.
That's like the one difference. Mm-hmm. So does Denoblians still come and become our friends? Like, I don't know. Right. But to go back to really quick on the first viewing, one of the things I really liked was it shows Zefram Cochrane, and they still give the sign, and he just shoots them. And that's when you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. I want to come back to that in a second, but I want to address what you just said there, Patrick, because I agree with you. So, In a Mirror Darkly is pure fun, and I really love it, and it's one of my favorite episodes of Enterprise, like the two-parter itself. But I get what you're saying, and I've talked about this on a few other podcasts, is if when you look at the Mirror Universe, especially when you get to Deep Space Nine and stuff like that, really the only thing that's different is that humans are bad and evil. Cardassians are basically still Cardassians. Klingons are basically still Klingons. We've got Kira, who's bad, but I attribute that mostly because she's in a position of power, right? And so she's being, influenced in this specific way because their type of rule was previously influenced by the way the Terror Empire ruled things, right? So yes, I don't necessarily think that all species are the opposite of what we saw them. I believe this mirror universe that we see is just the humans are bad. So to me, it also is a little bit off that we've got like this torturous Phlox. But I can also boil that down to, okay, he's a slave on the ship and he's just following the orders of the people above him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he just seemed to be too happy about it. And I mean, I guess you could also write that off as Stockholm Syndrome at this point. We don't know how long he's been a slave on the ship, so it could just be Stockholm Syndrome. And it doesn't ruin the episode for me, by the way.
No.
So it's not that I don't like these episodes. It's just that's just something I noticed watching these episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to go back, and then I'll just ask you that question. Since you brought up the divergence of Zefram Cochrane shooting the Vulcans, I want to ask your guys' interpretation of that prologue. Do you think that is the moment of the dimension splitting, or do you think it's before that?
Oh, I think it's well before that. I mean, what Zefram Cochrane was evidencing was this is how humanity has responded to, in every time of crisis, is to lash out in violence. I got a feel. I mean, and you can see in the opening credits, the images that they have of human history are all violent warfare. So, aliens show up and humans are going to show their true colors in that particular universe, which is, I'm going to reach into my jacket and take everything we can get our hands on after we kill you all.
I have a complicated answer for this. When was World War III? How long before Zefram Cochrane?
Ooh.
It was like right then, like the Zefram Cochrane
recent,
that we saw
right?
in First Contact. World War III was like just done, maybe a year or two.
Okay, so I think the split for humans happened at the end of World War III, because instead of deciding they all had to work together, they took this other path. Now, for the rest of the universe, I think the split happens the moment he shoots the Vulcan.
Okay.
Because until that moment, nothing changes for them. Nothing outside of Earth changes for any other race until the moment Zephyr Cochrane shoots.
Okay.
But I think what led Zephyr Cochrane to make the warp drive has changed.
Okay. I like that, actually. That's quite interesting. That's a really good point.
I like that. And then they mention it. They meant in to jump ahead to Demons and Terra Prime. There's that hint of did the Vulcans show up because we did warp drive, or had they been watching us for a long time, and could they have saved us from decimating ourselves in World War III, and that's why we hate them? So I mean, that could kind of play in a little bit with what you're talking about. What type of sentiment was Earth having, at least in that universe?
Mm-hmm. In other podcasts, we've actually talked about that too. That the Terra Prime movement could be an instigator for the mirror universe if it gained enough traction.
I think that's valid.
Yeah, awesome. No, I like that what you said, Patrick, that World War III, that's the split. World War III happens. How does humanity recoup from that? Do they recoup in a positive or a negative way? And then you're right, everything else is fine until he shoots the alien, and now humanity board their ship, take everything you can. Right.
Had the Vulcans not showed up, Terra, the Terran Empire may never exist, because it may never get to the point where it can exist.
Sure.
Excellent. I love that. That's great. So my favorite aspect of this, and what I do love about Season 4 of Enterprise, is how they try and tie it into the broader universe. So not only are they tying it into the broader universe by doing a mirror universe story, but they tie it in the broader universe by bringing in one of the most obscure references from the original Star Trek in The Defiant. And I didn't know this was coming when I first watched it. And when they said it was The Defiant, when they showed it on screen, I know I stood up from my chair and went like, oh my goodness. Like, it was the most amazing moment ever. And on Enterprise, there's many times when I critique them for maybe going to fan service a little too often. This one doesn't feel like fan service to me. This one feels like an outstanding sequel to the Enterprise incident.
Well, I think that this fits my bill of what is fan service too far, where for you and for me and for fans, for Kevin and for fans like that, we understand what they're showing us, right? Mm-hmm. But if my wife watches that episode, she doesn't know what the Defiant is. It doesn't ruin the episode.
Right.
For her, because she still understands it's a ship from the original series, mm-hmm. right? And she doesn't need to know much more other than, this thing got abandoned here and now we found it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it took, and plus the fact, at that point in time in 2005, any opportunity for us to, kind of step back onto that 23rd century / 1966 production design was exciting for us. I love that part of it. And, and they were, putting on uniforms, they were using the props, they were, that part was, as far as for my money, was really fun to watch.
Yeah, when Archer is in the TOS uniform, and she's like, "What is that?" I found it in the captain's wardrobe.
Yeah,
that was a great scene.
Yeah, and I also liked the few times that we could see him sitting in the big chair on the bridge. He sat in it like Commodore Decker, which was always great. Kind of the slouch arm over the side. I loved that part.
It's something I thought the episode did really well, and I probably didn't notice it until watching it this time. Everyone's look was just a little off. Their hair was different or whatever. And not like, Tucker, Tucker had the big scar or whatever, but everyone had new haircuts and stuff. And honestly, some of them looked better than the ones they sported the whole series. But, and some people looked massively different with that new haircut.
Yeah. I think that Archer's hairstyle definitely made him look more thuggish. Which to me worked in the context of the episode.
Mayweather's hair is the greatest,
but it's so 90s. I love it.
Yeah,
mm-hmm. I love his hair.
And then you take someone like T'Pol, looks like two different people.
Yeah,
mm-hmm. When she has the typical Vulcan hairstyle versus long hair down her back, it's such a different look. And I'm sure they did a little bit with makeup and stuff too, mm-hmm. changes.
Yeah,
but she just looks so different.
That part was fun. The production design for they really did. Again, the advantage, like you said, with a lot of these episodes, we're kind of seeing our characters that we've known for years crossing over and sneaking into, the behind enemy lines. This was not that. This was these. This is what's really happening then. And I think that them taking the steps that they did with the way the characters look was really smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really enjoyed that Hoshi gets a big part of all this, even though it's not our Hoshi. But just seeing that actress get to and she changes, she's a lot different than the Hoshi we've been seeing over the years. And so you really get to see how far she's able to go with her acting ability.
Yeah. And that was absolutely the most fun part for us in helping write the sequel was her character. I love the fact that, she's learning at the hands of ambitious people. And, it's like, hey, well, I could just as easily poison this champagne as I could serve it. And she walks on, because Archer said over and over, it's like, it's the person who has this technology is going to, be the next person in charge. And she took him at his word, and it worked.
Now, we do get a lot of wonderful callbacks here. We get a couple alien races as well that we saw in the original Star Trek. We got the Tholians, and we get the Gorn.
Mm-hmm.
So now, a lot of people aren't very happy with how the Gorn looks. I'm kind of one of them. The CGI just doesn't quite work for him. But I think the Tholian is really interesting, how the Tholian works. I love seeing the Tholian on screen. But Patrick, what do you think of the callback to these TOS aliens that we see on screen?
Oh, I loved it. I love the fact that we get this but this is the time we're in where we should be seeing these types of aliens. And I felt that one of the things that Enterprise did that bothered a lot of people was it did try and introduce new, which is good, but it didn't go back to any of the old that it could have for different continuity issues. It couldn't for some of them, but for this, now that we're in a different universe, we can see some of those characters that they didn't know before TOS. Mm-hmm. And I liked it. I liked the way they did it, and I liked the way they acted around them, treating the Tholian by lowering the temperature 50 degrees and it flipping out. That was great.
So, the Tholian was my favorite callback. The Gorn, while I am glad they did it, I thought that it just was like an excuse for filling out the story. Well, let's just throw a little bit of alien in here. We're walking around corridors we don't, that aren't, brightly lit, and getting bitten by the head and lifted off the ground. And I mean, there was stuff in it that I didn't quite get what purpose that served for the story. I mean, it was fun, but I mean, I wouldn't have. That just wouldn't have been the direction I went. But that's just me personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the first part is definitely stronger than the second part, but the second part is all about fun and being able to play with this TOS elements, So they're two different types of stories that are connected by the one plot thread, which is really kind of interesting, because the second episode is it's really campy, but it's wonderful, right, at the same time. So
in a sense, it was almost like as soon as they stepped on the Defiant, they kind of wanted to do their spin on a show from the original series. I mean, that script kind of felt more like an original series show than it did a modern Star Trek show.
Which is okay.
Oh, no, yeah.
I'm one or two off. It was fine. I enjoyed it. But it also got to the point of Hoshi at the end, which,
yes,
is important. And we did see that Archer was willing to fight to keep that ship and stuff like that, where our Archer wouldn't have done that.
That's right.
He would have just done what Starfleet had asked, and that would have been that. So I did like that he kind of realized, and I love the fact that he kept having a demon him walk behind him and talk to him.
I didn't like that. See, I didn't like that. Did you like that, Kevin?
I felt like that it was a device that would have worked better in print than it did on screen. But I did kind of like it. I mean, I just wonder if there would have been a different way to show that he was kind of psychotic. I don't know the better way, so I'm on board with keeping it. But that kind of internal dialogue sometimes works, I think, better in print than it does on screen.
It does, and maybe they could have fixed it by just not having him show up. like physically.
Yeah, I don't
in
know.
His head. But I liked it, and I liked the fact that that image looked even more menacing than the Archer that was menacing.
Yes, I agree with that.
See, for me, the reason why it didn't work is because the Archer that we saw in the first part is extremely confident to the point where he's overtaking command of the ship for the sole purpose of getting to this Federation signal that's in Tholian space. And I don't know, I realize it's only 2 episodes and we're just really reading into it, but I don't get that he would lose that much confidence in himself by reading about himself from another universe.
Mm-hmm.
Not the guy that I saw in the first episode.
I mean, that was an interesting thing, especially because Hoshi kept needling him about it, almost like she knew that was his weakness. But how well did she know him, considering that she was, hanging out with Captain Forrest? But yeah, that was like for him to read what did you see the? Are you guys Rick and Morty fans?
I know the show, but I haven't seen it.
There's an episode of Rick and Morty where Rick gives them, the family, these goggles that you could see what your lives are like in other universes, and of course, once you see anything that's better than what you've got now, you're gonna start throwing stuff across the room, which is exactly what Archer was doing. So it was kind of a fun, that insight into his self-esteem was good. The thing I think that's just, to me, that's always in the back of my mind when I watch these 2 episodes is that it very much feels like this version of the show has been on for a while, and I'm sampling 2 episodes of it in the middle of its 4th season or whatever, and I don't have any context going in, and it leaves us with, tune in next week, but so it really is just this little tiny slice of the mirror universe, and
yeah, you got it. There's definitely an established universe prior to this episode, and there's more to come after this episode.
Yeah.
You've got that spot on. So,
yeah.
The last thing I want to touch about in this, and then I'll ask you guys if you have anything you want to talk about. My favorite little piece of fan service in this one here, and again, it's fan service done right, is with Trip and his delta radiation burn.
Yeah.
Right? Because you just say delta radiation and it doesn't matter, right? But that's what happened to Pike.
Yep.
Was delta radiation. So I don't know. For me, when I said that, I'm like, oh, I love it. So to me, that's fan service done right, and I loved it. It was spot on.
My favorite character in the episode was Trip, without question.
Yes.
And that guy was somebody who had been beaten and perverted by the system, and right down to the fact that his face was melted off. I thought it was terrific.
And when they're sitting around in that meeting talking, and Archer's telling him there's another ship, and he's just like, so what? Just the way that he delivers that line is just so perfect,
Yeah, I would say I really like Trip too, and one of the reasons I really like Trip is because we see glimpses of that Trip in our universe at the beginning of season 3.
Oh, good point.
We see how that Trip could have come out here, but because of the morals of the universe, it doesn't.
Nice catch.
That's very insightful. I like that, and again, a testament to the performance. I think that like any show, there are actors of varying degrees of craft, but Connor Trinneer's performance as Trip is one of my absolute favorite things about Enterprise as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was phenomenal.
Excellent. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about for this 2-parter, Kevin, that you'd like to touch on before we move to Demons and Terra Prime?
Not that I can think of. It's just I think that is definitely a highlight of the series, and whether you are a longtime Star Trek fan or just coming in, cold, it's a pretty solid show.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Patrick, anything you wanted to talk about?
No, I think we hit it all. I think the only thing I would say is, and I probably could have left this till we talked about the next one, but there's kind of a theme among these 4 episodes, these 2 and the next 2, with the way people believe their society should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that's more of a discussion for the next 2 episods. So,
But what better time than now?
Yeah, it is pretty valid right now, especially, we've got a lot of racism going on right now in our lives, in our world. and we got a lot of hatred going in for the outsider as people view them. And so that's really what this episode is about. We've got humanity who's upset at aliens coming in, taking their jobs and things like that. Sounds very familiar. But I mean, while I'll get to it again, it's not a new movement. The movement's been around for a while, and I want to put that part on hold for a second because I do have a specific question about that. But we've got humans who are trying to stand up for what they think is right by getting rid of all the aliens on the planet. So they've got this leader named Paxton, and he's kind of like not a descendant of, but a student of Colonel Green, who we saw mentioned in a TOS episode in the Savage Curtain. And so it's really interesting to see this, and I think it's really believable. And we saw samples of this early in season 4 when those people attacked Phlox, right in the streets of San Francisco there. So we saw the beginnings of some hatred towards aliens and some anger towards aliens. So I'm really glad that they picked up this thread. And it sounds like you guys think that this is a very suitable episode for this time in Enterprise as well.
These 4 episodes to watch back to back like I did, being steeped in xenophobia, I don't remember having the reaction to them in 2005 that I have now. Sometimes they were just really hard to watch. I am sure that when I watched these in 2005, my response was, this is a federation. It wouldn't happen. I mean, they're advanced enough. I mean, that's not where people are going to be at this stage in our social evolution. So it wasn't as credible a threat to me then. Now that I recognize that we are not nearly as developed or advanced or socially conscious as I thought we were, then it's pretty telling.
So maybe I don't know. Were you still in New York for 9/11, Kevin?
No, I moved to Kansas in 1969. So, but I was working as a news editor for a newspaper in the Kansas City metropolitan area, and I have a lot of family in New York still.
Okay, so maybe my perspective at the time was that these were extremely poignant episodes because of what was going on. And maybe it's because I was in New York, it was a little more in the forefront, but I can remember, people being attacked outside mosques. Now, look, the message has changed a little bit from 2005 to 2019 because of who the target of who they want to get rid of is.
Yes.
To some degree. I mean, look, Muslims are still a major target of who people want gone. The people who do want people gone, I should say, are targeting Muslims, but not just Muslims now. Right after 9/11, it was pretty much, they forgot about everyone else, and it was just the Muslims because they were the terrorists were Muslim.
Mm-hmm. At that time, it felt like we were targeting, and I mean, we as, that mindset, whoever is targeting that, I did not hear the phrase white national or white supremacy like I do now. It felt like that the people who were hating were pointing at a more specific target in 2005, whereas now it feels like it's anybody who doesn't look like me, I hate equally.
Yeah, and I agree that there was some of that. I mean, look, white nationalists and white supremacists were behind a lot of that.
Correct.
In 2005, but there were other people who were on board with their message.
Yes.
Whereas now a lot of those people are like, oh, wait a second. Now it's coming towards me, and that's not right. Now I realize what happened back then wasn't right either.
Yes, I think that's a great way to phrase it.
Yeah, and there's people like me who I didn't think it was right then, but I didn't understand. I was still, I was 19 years old, right, in 2001. So, yes, I'm an adult technically, right, but I'm not. I'm immature kid at 19 years old, still in college trying to drink. So, I didn't understand how profound it was till later on in life. And so now it makes a bigger impact.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I do remember the stories of people being attacked just for being Muslim or for being in a mosque or for going near a mosque. And that still happens today, by the way, because they wanted to, and I don't know if it happened or not, or if it's going to happen. They wanted, I think it did happen, build a mosque down by the World Trade Center.
Yes.
And people lost their minds because, well, they're the terrorists. I don't exactly know if that's true, guys. I don't know if the people in this mosque had anything to do with that. In fact, I'm fairly sure they didn't.
Yeah. And now, what was the? There was a couple of shows in Deep Space Nine's run that were pretty focused on xenophobia too. Am I correct? The riots. I'm trying to remember.
Well, they had all the ones about the ones that were like kind of out of universe were when they were about when he was playing an author.
Oh yeah, that was Far Beyond the Stars. This was one I want, not future. I'm trying to remember the name of the title of the episode.
Past tense.
I'm sorry?
Past tense when they
That's
go
it.
back to the Bell riots.
There you go.
They actually
Yes.
just rewatched it because they just covered it on Mission Log here.
There you go.
A few weeks ago. But yeah, so there was the Bell riots and the secluding people into the sanctuary districts. But it's different because that wasn't racially motivated. Like there was white people in there as well. It was just people that didn't have jobs and stuff were getting shoveled in there.
Yeah, it was socioeconomic rather than yeah.
Right, but at the time, I mean, those episodes were the late 90s, and you had more of a class war going on in America at the time between the rich and the poor. So it made more sense to write that story from that lens. Whereas now in 2005, look, and I've said it a million times on this podcast, people are probably sick of hearing me, but season 3 is 9/11 and its fallout. That's what season 3 is, and this is the culmination of that at the end of 4.
I think that's very valid.
You know, and I think one of the great scenes is that Archer, being an optimist, comes back and says, well, we've been gone for so long, I figured this would be over with by now.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, it's only worse, which, by the way, in 2019, it's way worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. One of the interesting things that I saw in Demons and Terra Prime that really affects me every time I watch it, and is seeing black people involved in this Terra Prime movement. You know, and I think it's a really interesting choice that they added it into the writing of this because of the history that African American people have had in the United States with racism and stuff. And I think it adds an extra layer of shock and surprise to the storytelling by seeing a black person standing up there saying all the things that white people have been saying, like racist white people have been saying for decades and centuries.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a deliberate choice by and Star Trek has been great at that since the beginning of, making, choices of who's representing what social stance on an issue and helping us question the validity of that because of where the message is coming from. And I'm positive that those choices were made deliberately.
Well, and what's interesting about it is they say a lot of the things, and I don't know, maybe I have bad friends or whatever, but I hear other people saying now, like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm sure that white people are still the overwhelming majority in America, right? But we're at least 51%. Yet I continue to hear, we're the minority now, and that's the exact same thing he was saying on that stage.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're not. You're not the minority. It's not even close. It's obvious in that show and here.
I think that was the part that was really resonating with me as I was rewatching this was what that rhetoric that a scriptwriter came up with in 2005 to put in their mouths was eerily similar to what we hear people saying now. I mean, it really was. Sometimes it was just giving me chills.
Yeah,
but I think it was being said back then, and we didn't hear it as often because we are not on Facebook.
Yeah, and I wasn't paying attention.
Right, and that's the other thing too, and that's what I mean by I was 19, so I didn't realize it as much, but it said an awful lot here now in New York, and other places. I can speak for where I live because that's where I live, but you also see it when you watch these quote unquote protests, with the people in polo shirts, but they're saying these exact same things and seemingly intelligent people are believing them. That's the part that scares me, is that it's really easy to say, oh, that guy's a whack job. Who cares what he has to say? It's him and 10 friends, whatever, right? But when seemingly intelligent people start buying into it, that's when you start ending up with the problems that you have in this episode.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yeah, it was a, but of all the stories there were to tell, to go out on, because when they were making these choices of when this was going to take place, and I mean, they felt strongly enough to send, if we're going to send one last message with Enterprise, a solid two-parter, or whatever, the message we want to send is to borrow the Star Wars line, we can't give in to hate, which I think is definitely a Star Trek message that is communicated to varying degrees of success in various Star Trek shows for the last 50 years.
I do want to talk about, I had mentioned earlier that I wanted to come back to a point, and this might be a hard topic to talk about, and I will admit 100% that I'm not the most educated person on this stuff here, but President Samuels has a history with Terra Prime. Terra Prime has been around for a long time. I would say Samuels is probably, mid-50s. I would say in the show, and he said he was a young teenager at the time. So 40 years ago, he was a member of Terra Prime. His dad died in a ship accident, and he blamed I can't remember the alien race that was in charge of the ship at the time. So he joined Terra Prime. And I wanted to talk about this because Archer brings it up to him to kind of get some information, which is, I didn't like that Archer did that, right? Because it's just shy of blackmailing the guy to get the information he needs, and it didn't feel like an Archer thing for him to do. But I do like Samuel's response to it, where he's like, look, I was a young kid at once, and he's like, yes, you did your work, you dug it up, and it's not something I'm proud of, but it's something that I did in my past. And we're at this point right now in social media where you could dig up a tweet from 10 years ago or whatever, and it can haunt you, and it can ruin somebody's political career. It can ruin their acting career based on something they've said. And so it had me thinking about those things. And it's like, how long do people need to be accountable for something that they've done in their youth? And it seems like the answer nowadays is always.
Well, I mean, I think we're still trying to figure that part out. The tough part is, I'm an old white guy. I mean, I have not experienced a lot of the things that many other people have experienced because of what they're bringing to the table that I'm not. One thing that that you can't tell somebody when their feelings are hurt. Just as like, oh, come on, get over it. I mean, nobody has that permission to do that. I do think that there are we're still testing the waters to answer that question. When is I'm sorry, I was wrong, I want to do better? When is that going to be accepted? On one hand, James Gunn, who was whose comments were brought to light that cost him his gig, at least temporarily, with Guardians of the Galaxy, is being given opportunities to work again. I was just reading an article in the New York Times today, and I'm going to lose the name of the person, but there is a writer who is a political analyst that is coming out with a book basically about strategies that the Democrats can take, in the next presidential election. And there are people who are upset that this person who had been brought up as who made a number of, I think 5 or 6 different women had reported him as being sexually aggressive in the workplace, and they felt violated, and that led to him losing his the job that he had at the time. But now he's writing a book. I don't know who gets, when do you give that person the next chance? Who is the person that says it's okay for someone to live and learn? We've got to figure that part out. And it's, but I'm not the person who gets to say, yes, here is somebody who has atoned for his or her behavior that gets the next opportunity, and here's somebody who doesn't.
Right. So as somebody, like, if we just take it from the lens of Star Trek for a second, as somebody who would be accepted by the Terra Prime movement, I'm going to basically echo what Kevin just said. I don't get to say to someone who wouldn't, get over it.
Right.
I know it happened when he was 18, but you should get over it now. Because it's really easy for me to get over it because he doesn't have a problem with me. And he never had a problem with me. And maybe he doesn't have a problem with you anymore. But I think the answer to that question is overly complex because it also depends on what he did and how much involvement he had. If he went to 4 meetings for Terra Prime and realized I don't really want to be a part of this, then I don't really care that he did it when he was 18. If he was in it for 2 or 3 years and carried out some operations, well, maybe he's not quite ready to be president then because he's too conflicted at that point.
Yeah, the thing that we didn't have then that we've got now is the prevalence of social media. Mm-hmm. And if that episode was made in 2019, instead of saying, yeah, I went to some meetings, might he have said, yeah, I made some broadcasts, or I made some videos, or whatever. I mean, is one horrible tweet, better or worse than 5 only kind of horrible tweets? I mean, it's such a difficult subjective place for any of us to try to reach into, but Archer's decision to use that, the president's past against him, and being okay with it is, an interesting decision for him to make. It's no different than the decision that DePaul makes to mention that, hey, you've got to Peter Weller's character, whose name I'm going to lose, you've got a disease that is being treated by technology that was brought to your planet by non-humans. Mm-hmm. So aren't you compromised in that, you're telling all of us to get off planet, but, you're sick and you would be worse off if you didn't have the technological advances that, a non-human brought to you.
Mm-hmm. See, when I hear that, because of, so John Frederick Paxton is his name, and when he brings that up, he's like, I'm not the first, I don't think he uses the dictator, I'm not the first leader or whatever who doesn't live up to his own standards. Right. And as soon as he says that line, like, I don't know if this is what they intended, it probably was, but I think of Hitler, because Hitler wasn't what he wanted his people to strive to. And I'm like, you're just putting this guy in an even worse category.
I think that was intentional. I mean,
okay, good. Yeah, because that's what I felt when I read this. Because he's like white people from Germany and whatnot. He wasn't even from Germany, and like he wasn't blonde hair, blue eyed, and like all this stuff. So like that was my initial thought for comparing him to Hitler, and I'm like, oh, awesome! Like that's a very strong visual image in my head, just for that one little line.
And it doesn't just like, obviously Hitler is going to be the first one anyone thinks of because of how high profile World War II was, but a lot of cult leaders are the same way. A lot of cult leaders all over the world over the years have been exactly that. They have not been what they've claimed was perfect.
Yeah.
Jonestown was like that. Waco, Texas was like that. Heaven's Gate, the old guy, was like. There's so many of them you could point to that fit this description. I mean, it would be kind of crazy for you to think of those before Hitler, but I'm just saying this is a repetitive pattern, and this is basically Terra Prime is basically a cult, right?
Oh yeah, I think that's fair. And when here we are trying to unpack these 2 episodes, and it's laudable for Star Trek to take on an issue that is this complex, and these are 14-year-old episodes, and they're as relevant now as they've ever been. But Jiminy Christmas, I mean, this is just this isn't something that 2 TV shows are going to be able to move the needle on. We hope that maybe there's a kid out there somewhere who watched this at age 14 that now at age 28 doesn't behave the way he or she might have, because they saw in those episodes that there's a better way to treat them.
So, off topic. I'm that kid, but I'm from TOS. I mean, I'm not that old, but I watched, my first episode was Let That Be Your Last Battlefield.
Yeah.
and watching that episode, and it's not watching the episode. The more important thing is what we're doing right now and talking about that episode.
Yeah.
But talking that episode through with my father, and as a 7-year-old kid not understanding that black on one side, white on the other was different from black on one side and white on the other.
Yes.
But talking through that episode is what informed a lot of my adult life so far.
Yep.
And how I treat others or see others or whatever the case may be. And so I agree with you. I hope that someone watched these episodes as a child or a teenager or whatever and had these discussions with their parents. And their parents were like mine, who explained to me why that's wrong, why it's not okay to look at people that way, and ended up, better off. The world's a little bit better place for every one person that's in that mindset, I guess. What's interesting is we've talked about these 2 episodes for probably 30 minutes now. We haven't even touched on the fact that there's a baby involved.
Yeah, we haven't touched on the baby yet. So yeah, there's a baby.
The baby baffles me. The baby that just baffled me.
What I feel is it was just a story device to prove the rest of the episode we just talked about.
It was just a story device to rip my frickin' heart out.
Well, that happens at the end, but before that, I think it was proof of the overarching topic of this racism and xenophobia, because they flat out in the beginning of the episode call it an abomination.
Yes.
And there are people who believe if you're white and your husband or wife is black, that's a problem.
That's and they were
in 2019. That's ridiculous to think, but there are people out there who believe it.
The lengths that this group went to in the context of the episode. I mean, to suggest that there are covert agents of Terra Prime on Enterprise that would take, biological material and get it off the ship and put it in the hands of scientists that would create this, this child, just so they could show it as evidence of abomination, as you said. I mean, I guess that's the only thing they came up with that said, we need to show the viewer in this short amount of time the great lengths that people who hate will go to scare other people into hating. But other than that, I just thought that whole part was.
It's even more elaborate than some Bond villains.
Yes. And it's and it was sad. I mean, it was like and then when to underscore how horrible their actions were, they killed the baby off. There were decisions that were made in that particular screenplay that I would not have made myself. Yeah,
because even if if fans that they like, I don't want to consider the next episode, so this is my finale. Like, that's a pretty downer finale to be.
There's a next episode.
Yeah. That's a pretty downer thing to end your show on, even there too.
For a show that, especially in the 4th season, was so hopeful and so optimistic, and finding places to be fun. What we got cheated out of was a 5th season where that show really, under who I think was the right showrunner, could have flourished and created some of the best Star Trek moments, among all the Star Trek moments. And so to cancel the series was kind of our poke in the eye. And These Are the Voyages was our kick to the balls.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that in 1 second here. One thing that I did want to say, because you did bring it up, though, is I'm so glad. Now, Kevin, you only watched these 4, so I don't know if you remember exactly, but leading up into these episodes, there's been a lot of friction between Trip and Kelby.
Yes.
And I am so glad that it didn't turn out to be Kelby, and it turned out to be somebody else. I realized that they manipulated the Evans to think that it was him, but I'm glad that it wasn't him, because I don't want another person who's angry at somebody so they do something nasty. Like, some people can just be mad and not have to do some heinous action. Like what happened to Kelby is crappy. What Trip did to Kelby is crappy. He left the ship, he came back, and he said he was leaving, and then he stayed and kicked him out of his job again. Yes, fine, the alien pheromones amplified that stuff in Bound, But I mean, like, that is kind of crappy. He lost his promotion because of Trip jerking around and what was going on with DePaul, right?
Now,
so,
do you agree with the writer's decision on how the Terra Prime operative was dispatched?
doesn't make sense to me.
I just that part sat really wrong with me too.
For him to be at Archer with a gun to suddenly decide to off himself in front of Archer just doesn't make any sense.
You know what I felt like they were doing? I felt like they were trying to do their version of Captain Terrell in Star Trek II.
But that's you're talking about the one where he first off, that was the worst. I love Archer, but that was the worst reaction to try and get a gun away from somebody in the history of television. He was a step away and couldn't make it in time. But he says, I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Like, nonsense.
Right. I don't know what that was. It was like, hey, we've got to figure out, here's a plot thread that we've got. There's somebody running around on the ship that works for Terra Prime. We need to tidy this up before we go to commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My only answer to that, and again, this is headcanon that we talk about on the show, is he was in a similar situation as Samuels, where he was just confused at the time and he thought he was helping them out, so he got the DNA off the ship that he needed to, and he didn't want anybody to get hurt, and now he regrets his actions and he killed himself.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I don't know, it's just weird. I don't know. So
yeah, I think that this was a laudable goal for them to pick this ambitious an ambitious show to try to address a topic that is certainly, front page news for us nowadays every day.
Mm-hmm. That
I think it was just too much for them to try to unpack in 100 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look, the only thing I know you guys both said, like, had the next episode not happened, and I know I joke about it all the time, but it did happen. But if it didn't happen, this being the ending, to me, and maybe it's because I'm more of a cynical person than both of you, that would have been a perfect ending for me if it had to end in season 4.
That'd be fine.
Because I think everything was so negative at the time, at least where I lived, that it seemed to fit right. Look, so Star Trek has always been a lens of us, and it's always been a commentary on social issues to me, and that's been more important than any of the other aspects of the show. I liked other aspects of the show, but that is the most important aspect for me. So for it to end that way would not have. It would have been good for me. I would have thought it would have fit.
I think I would be happier with it than unhappy with it. It just was, and how many shows get the luxury of knowing when they're going to end and try to put a bow on everything for us as fans? Fewer than you think.
Mm-hmm. So ironic you would mention it that way. So Scott Bakula, this is just a Scott Bakula little trivia thing. Quantum Leap didn't know it was getting canceled. It had a good idea, and that's why it ended the way it did so terribly with just the line, he never got home. And then in this one, he was so furious about the ending of this one. I forget who said it, but they were like, this is the only time they thought he wanted to strangle them.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that
Berman, maybe?
No, I think it was Braga. I think Braga said that it was
Braga.
The only time that Bakula was mad at him and was yelling at him. And he should have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he got 2 really garbagey endings in his 2 biggest shows.
Yeah. Well, and my favorite Scott Bakula show of them all, if you haven't watched it, watch it. Men of a Certain Age.
I love that show.
I loved it, and that show was gone way too soon. 2 seasons was not nearly enough.
Yeah, it just kind of disappeared.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, let's move on to These Are the Voyages. We will talk about it here. Okay, so I don't hate this episode. Okay, I don't like that it's the final episode. Now, there's kind of like this counter movement right now. We've talked to a few people on the show, and they're like, had this been like a mid-season episode, nobody would be batting an eye at this.
Yep, I agree.
They're right, though.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. They're right. I was going to say, I don't hate the episode in concept.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that this is the last episode of the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it could have even been a season finale. As long as it wasn't the finale.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been a better season finale than that. Was it a season 2 next gen finale? Was the clip show with Riker, dying or something? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was awesome.
It's always Riker.
Yeah. But this is. I mean, when it happened, everyone was outraged for a reason. Braga has recanted publicly more than once, saying that they thought it was a great idea when it was happening. But I'm with you guys. It would have been fine if it had been, episode 10 of 22.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could have even been right before this block of 4.
That's a good point.
And it would have been fine. It's just that the fact that this is how it ends is terrible. And if you remember, Brandon, way back when we first started podcasting, we were actually talking and coming up with episodes so we could do Warp 5 every week while Floyd was still here. So I was filling in the weeks between. Mm-hmm. And we had done, what 2 episodes would you watch together, this and TOS? And I actually picked this episode and the first episode of TOS. Because of how this one physically ends and that one starts.
Oh, nice.
So I know I've joked for a year and a half about how bad this episode is, doesn't exist. It does feel more like a TNG episode, but it's not the episode, it's the placement of the episodes that's so bad.
Like, I like the story that's going on. I like how it ties it up. Like, let's go back to Rigel 10, which is where we started the show. We've got Shran coming back after a long period of time. And even, like, this story, but even there, like, that story is not a good finale story. It's not good enough to be a finale, right? It's a good episode maybe near the end, like a second or third last episode of a show. Even if they didn't do the Troy Riker, it's not strong enough to be a finale on its own.
I 100% agree. I mean, and to me, there are flaws all the way through it. And it just felt like when they made the decision to do this, they thought what people wanted was more next gen. And everything was done through the lens of, Riker's journey in decision making, and the Enterprise crew was an afterthought. And the worst afterthought of all was this, waiting for the second shoe to drop after Troy's like, well, if only you knew he wasn't getting home. You're like,
oh,
what?
Man, that line.
And then we're like waiting and waiting and waiting for, for this to happen. It just was just poorly devised.
Yeah, and I think, and one of the things that drives people crazy about this episode, that actually doesn't bother me, is that Trip dies. And I know they actually give you an out because this is a hologram, so you can just ignore it. But even that, like, he died a hero's death, so it doesn't really bother me that had happened in and of itself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you're going to die as a character on a TV show, good for you. You got paychecks for every episode.
and I did like the wink to the camera as they shoved him in the hyperbaric chamber or whatever. But the other thing that I had to wonder, and this is maybe a little bit more deeper analysis than this episode deserves, but given the fact that this is all through a hologram program, do we even know, like, the dialogue in between the characters? I mean, is the computer recording all this and saving all this, or is all of that speculation? I mean, I don't know if there would be record of the conversation that Trip and T'Pol had, on, do you miss me? I mean, where did they have record of that? That was the thing that as my disgust with the episode started to deepen, and I was really digging into what works and what doesn't. I thought, this is just a carnival ride. It's not. This isn't an adventure of the Enterprise. This is the Star Tours of, and so that just started to bug me worse.
So let me address that here, Patrick, before you jump in. So, like, to me, I don't know. I grant that. I don't have any problems with that myself, because that's no different than where the hell did they get the footage in Star Trek 4 for the Klingons going onto the bridge of the Enterprise right before it blows up? Because that is, right, like, where did that come from? Because the ship blew up. So whatever security footage there was is gone when the ship blew up. So I don't know, like, it's one of those things that you have to do in TV. How many times has there been a recap of some sort, and it's like, technically that footage of what we're seeing is not even possible. So I just boil it into that same category.
That's fair.
Well, no, but hold on. I wouldn't. I can see why you would, but I wouldn't, And one of the reasons is because I do security systems, but the footage of on the bridge right before something explodes can be held off-site. But would the Federation be recording everyone in their bedrooms? Is a little different.
You know what? This is Alexa. This is what happens. This is Alexa. I mean, this is what she's going to evolve into.
And maybe that's how they got it. That's true. But I think most people's headcanon is they just made up history, and, history's not always accurate. And don't we have that episode of Voyager where they're watching the history of Voyager or some nonsense?
Yeah, but that's actually really good.
No, it is, but it's nothing like what actually happened.
Yeah, is it like the Doctor is still activated in some museum like hundreds of years? Yeah, that's a fantastic episode.
Yeah, but they show Voyager as this massive warship that came in just to kill people. Like that didn't really happen, and that's
I don't know, man. Have you seen Voyager? That's pretty close to what they did every week.
Okay, true, but that wasn't their intent, and the ship looked nothing like that. Yep. The ship in that episode looked way better than the actual Voyager, and I actually like Voyager.
Yes,
the ship. But like, so what's to say most of this isn't doctored or changed or rewritten or improvised or whatever just to make this program, where you could have done it much better had you actually just given me the story.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing that also, as we said, and give this episode the death of 1,000 cuts that it deserves. But I mean, a 6-year time jump. A 6-year time jump that there's all those stories that happened in between the end of Terra Prime and the beginning of These Are the Voyages, and I felt like just when you told me that, I was a little like, dang, this is just hard to, I feel like I'm missing all the good stuff.
Yeah. See, I tweeted out the other day too. Like, I really love the stuff between Chef and the crew, and I mean, to me, that's some really touching stuff. And I actually tweeted out, I'm like, man, one of my dreams would be that Jonathan Frakes actually was hired on for season 5 of Enterprise and played Chef, and he had a role like Guinan.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, and
because he's awesome in it. He's awesome in that role.
But again, that goes back to what Kevin said. This was more of a TNG-esque episode, and Frank's was Guinan. But I think the whole episode, it was to get to the point of we're going to start the Federation, but also it was the point to see these characters' last moments.
Yeah, together.
And their feelings towards Archer and one another or whatever through the eyes of the chef. And this was a way of getting a one-on-one interview with each character without sitting them down for a one-on-one interview. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That's
and I like that too, but
Brandon Braga has, from what I understand, come forward more than once and said, we went into this finale thinking it would be more fun to make a lost TNG episode than it would be to do an Enterprise finale. And that just feels like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what it was too? I think part of it was, and this might be why in later years, people who watch it now too don't feel the same kind of visceral hate that people who watched it first run did, is if you are watching it later or whatever, I mean, yeah, you wanted to make a TNG episode, a lost TNG episode. That's great now. However, back then, there were so many people who hated Enterprise.
Yeah.
That if you were a fan of Enterprise, you were constantly defending it.
Yep, that's true.
So for your last episode to be an episode of TNG, the show that everyone was saying was better than the one you were currently watching, was even worse because you can't. How do I even defend this?
Yeah.
Because everyone that liked TNG was, see, their last episode had to be an episode of my show.
And you're right. You're exactly right. That's the way it felt at the time. So
I remember watching that episode live, and I was so let down because I knew it was a 2-hour finale. Because they aired Demons one week.
Yeah.
Yeah. They aired Demons one week, and they aired Terra Prime and These Are the Voyages back to back as a 2-hour finale. And I'm like, well, I heard that the last episode had nothing to do with it, but they're airing a 2-hour finale here, so I'm excited about this. And then I watch it, and I'm like,
it had nothing to do with it.
What just happened to me? What just happened? So...
And that was the other problem, too. You got all excited for this big 2-hour extravaganza that turned out to be a good ending to the episode the week before, and then something that should have been on the DVD in a bonus feature.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, I have a question for you, and we're not going to talk about the books.
Okay, that's fine.
No books. Why the hell did he wink at him? Why did Trip wink at him? Why did they have this slow motion wink?
I don't know. I kind of liked it. It was just like, hey, everything's going to be okay. And then, I don't know.
See, to me as well, like watching this again, Trip's sacrifice is so... It doesn't work for me in this episode. Like, I understand... I don't know why they wrote it this way, because how many times have we seen aliens take over the ship on Star Trek? Right?
Yeah.
Like 10% of the episodes are aliens take over the ship.
Yeah.
Okay. Captain Picard is a child, and they figure out a way to take over the ship back from the Ferengi.
Yeah.
And this panic, this sudden panic that Trip is in, and the desire to, like, you know what, my only solution for this is to off myself and kill all these people as well, is just, to me, it's way over the top from the 700 episodes of Star Trek that have come before it. It doesn't fit in the tone of what Star Trek is.
What I feel, well, first off, we don't have to remember that they, spent however many hours before the aliens showed up getting loaded, so we could always blame the whiskey. But
and that looked like good whiskey.
Yeah, evidently. I mean, Zephyr Cochrane picked it out. But
yes, see.
But I also think that that at least, and this is me trying to give the benefit of the doubt to this particular story. Trip was very conscious of the role that Archer played as a morale builder and a historical figure, and just kind of this idea that this is a man who is I am in the presence of a man who is shaping the course of galactic history. Mm-hmm. And when there was this this possibility that these aliens from whatever planet are going to show up and shoot him because they're mad that they didn't get their amethyst, was so scary to him that, it can't end this way. It can't end this way. And he decided to, flail his arms and do everything he could to make sure that Archer didn't die, because all he could see in his mind is what would the future be like without this person alive. And so he decided that, it was at all costs, he was going to preserve Archer's life. Again, it didn't feel like there was enough room for that moment to be authentic. That whole story just felt shortened, because every time there was room for it to try to breathe, that, Riker would say freeze program, and we were back into a next gen episode. And
he would fast forward an hour.
Yes. Or
ruining.
Say, the next 16 hours are boring. You should really.
Right. So all of a sudden, like, you're like, I wanted to hear the next line.
Yeah.
What was going to be said next? But so I understand what you're saying, Brandon. But I guess for me, I agree with Kevin. I think he felt I have to save Archer, and I feel like with Shran and his kid on board, that Archer was going to die before he gave that up, and he was going to die. There was no two ways about it. He wasn't going to give Shran up, and that's why he demanded they knock him out. I also think that he didn't really know he was going to die. He thought there was a chance he was going to blow this thing, and from where he was in the room, he would be okay.
Yeah, because the injuries that he died of, if I heard it correctly, was that he breathed in superheated air and melted his lungs.
Which, by the way, he would never do. I could promise you that would be the one way he wouldn't die, given his profession.
And I believe you. And that's the thing that I think that he maybe he knew, well, I know what to do. And then something happened, the concussion went wrong, or something hit him in the head, or who knows what. I think Trip died because Trip made a mistake. He knew he was going to get out of this okay, but something effed up and he didn't.
Yeah, because I can tell you from personal experience, like I've never overloaded a system on purpose. I've never had an explosion like that go off, thankfully, in front of me. However, we are trained very young in the business, and I'm just, I'm not doing Starship, so I have to assume he understands explosions and electrical arcs. But that before you throw anything, you take a massive breath in. Because anytime anyone is ever startled in life, think of any time you've ever been startled.
Yes.
The first thing you do is go,
yep.
Right? But if you're holding all the air you can hold in your lungs, when that happens, when you get that flash, you don't breathe in, you actually breathe out. If anything.
Yeah.
And that's, you then will not suck in that explosion. And it's not even the explosion you have to worry about sucking in, because while that's hot, the air around it is about, the explosion itself is about the temperature of the sun. The air around it is pretty close.
Superheated, yeah.
But we're trained that, and the joke of it is, I'm a righty, so I throw the breaker with my left hand, because if it blows up and takes my arm off, at least I can sign the checks for disability. But, so he would have spun his back to it first off. If this was real, he would have spun his back to it so that the explosion would only burn his back, and he would have breathed in just before it happened. And watching it this time, I watched for that, because anyone in the trade would know that's what you should do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, giving more credit to that particular story than it may deserve.
A ton more than it should deserve, but if we're gonna talk about it, we might as well.
Yeah. No, it's fair. It's fair.
Okay, so I guess the last thing that we should talk about then is we should talk about a little bit about the Pegasus arc that's in the story here. Even there, to me, it's odd that they chose that episode, because for him to be taking the time to have this holodeck thing while that episode is going on, it just doesn't work for me as well. I like the Pegasus a lot. I think it's a wonderful episode. But even there, it's not like it's this. I don't buy that it's this life and death of a decision for Riker that he needs to take the time out while this stuff is going on and watch this holographic program.
Yeah.
So even that choice of an episode is a very strange one to me, because that's never considered a fan favorite episode. Like with D Space Nine doing Trials and Tribulations, while I don't think The Troubles with Tribbles is the best episode of TOS, many people do. Right? So, there's that justification. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that Pegasus is the best episode of The Next Generation. Everybody seems to like it.
I like it because I thought it was intriguing. But, yeah, the internet is not clamoring for the master cut mashup of the Pegasus and These Are the Voyages, where you watch the beginning of the Pegasus and then sandwich in These Are the Voyages and then finish the Pegasus. I mean,
Can I confess that when we did our 2016 rewatch for Trek FM, I actually did that. I paused Pegasus, took out my disc, at about 20 minutes left in the episode, popped in These Are the Voyages, and then watched it. It doesn't quite work.
Yeah,
but I actually did that, and I'll never do it again.
Yeah, it is. It's the Jabba the Hutt in the hangar bay of Star Trek.
Oh man, yeah, it is. So. I don't know. Patrick, do you have thoughts on them choosing the Pegasus? Any comments?
No, I don't care. I just like I don't care what episode they picked. Whatever episode they picked, I'd find a reason to not like it. So why not the Pegasus?
Yeah. They should have, instead of done a TNG episode, they should have just done a Voyager episode where we see Paris and Janeway watching this holodeck before they have sex as salamanders. That would have been terrific.
But again, they chose TNG because Voyager sucks, and Deep Space Nine sucks, and Enterprise sucks, and everything sucks except for The Next Generation, right?
Unless, of course, you go to the news articles 1 week before TNG came out, then it sucked.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Exactly. I will tell you the part that I still kind of think is cool in These Are the Voyages. I do like the very end where they take the intro to the show and do the Picard, Kirk, Archer mashup. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I love it.
It's the entire reason why I picked it for my 2-part watch with this and TOS. Was that one little part.
Yeah.
That and them showing you the conference where they're going to start the Federation, I thought was cool.
That is cool. I mean, good thing that his speech that was so good, Troy had to memorize it in school. We hear nothing of.
Yeah.
Did that not drive everyone crazy? It's such a great speech, and then they just get rid of it.
Yeah.
But that it fits perfectly with the writing of this episode.
Can't live up to it, so.
Look, the most important thing ever said in human history.
Yeah.
Pause program.
Yeah.
Fast forward 1 hour. And that's my speech.
Yeah, it's like he's getting ready to do. Yeah, to do that thing, and Troy says, "Well, it sounds like you made your decision. I guess we're done here." Okay, it's like what?
Could you get to that point? Like, even if that was a true story, right? Could you do that at that moment?
No, and play it out.
Would you watch? Would you watch?
Yeah.
Everything up until the signing of the Declaration of Independence, go, I'm good.
If you make it through the White Album and decide to skip Revolution 9, that's fine. But nobody's going to make it all the way to this point and skip that speech. Nobody's going to. God.
Well, you guys haven't even mentioned what I think is the biggest crime in this episode.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this is season 7 of The Next Generation. Data is not asking, why am I checking for rain in season 7?
Good point. That's an excellent point.
They don't even know Data's line. They don't even know Data's dialogue properly.
I don't know. Well, they had to go season 7 because that was the season of the uniforms that fit Frakes. That's horrible. I'm a big guy too. Dang it.
Okay, so we all love These Are the Voyages. Greatest
finale
ever.
Yes. It was a wonderful moment to start.
Wonderful. Just wonderful.
Yes. Anyways, any final thoughts on these? We went longer than I thought. This has been a wonderful conversation.
We've had fun. I mean, and you were right. You said we were going to sit down and just be three guys talking. And the truth is that when you look at these 5 episodes in this weird little microcosm of those 5 stories, we really hit on so many things that make Star Trek work over 50 years. The idea that we have wonderfully imaginative tales that throw us into, these storytelling devices like the mirror universe that were beyond our imagination. We went into relevant and very, thought-provoking social commentary. We have a sense of characters that are at their best when they're working with each other, and reasons for them to love them for their brokenness. I mean, when you look at the things they were trying to do in those 5 hours, that's why Star Trek has worked for 50 years. The frailties of those episodes are glaring for those of us who love this show.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, just a few things I wanted to touch on real quick. One, with the first 2 episodes, if the Terran Empire was really as cutthroat as it is, I don't see it actually surviving to be an empire at any point.
Yeah.
It's great that, and I know people have made this comment to me, they went, well, in the Italian mafia in the 1920s, they would kill each other left and right. Yeah, but they were really only fighting against the FBI. Really? And each other. So, and the FBI wasn't what it is today, but if they had every world government going after them, they wouldn't have lasted a week with that kind of, at some point they would have to protect themselves, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I always wondered, if you don't like the grades you get in a course in Starfleet Academy and the Terran Empire, can you kill your teacher?
And then become it.
Yes.
You become the teacher.
I've now become the teacher.
So I got an A. But that's what I mean. Like, it just wouldn't work, but I get why they do it. That's just an observation. And another thing, when they went into demons, when they went into demons, I thought the first time watching this, I thought we were still in the mirror universe.
Oh.
Okay. It was still dark. The halls were dark. Everything was dark, and the way they were talking, and you'll remember what it is. It's an abomination. And then the regular intro came in, and I went, oh, well, this is happening in the real universe.
I hadn't thought about that, but boy, that's a good insight. That's true.
Mm-hmm. So, but other than that, I mean, look, I enjoyed it. I enjoy Star Trek, and whatever. There are bad episodes at times. Oh, there's definitely bad placement of episodes at times. But overall, I mean, Enterprise is my favorite series. It is. I know it's no one else's. I'm the only person in the world who believes that.
That's not true. There's plenty of people who call it that.
But, and it's for the reason that I lived the social commentary they were talking about. Unlike all the other iterations of Star Trek, where I was either, I was 4 when Next Generation came out. I wasn't alive when TOS came out, and I was too young for the other stuff because most of it was still talking about TOS era topics, But this one I was actually alive and very conscious of, and when Enterprise was on, I'm joining the military because of things that had happened in this country. And so I understand both sides of that coin that they're trying to tell us with these characters. And so it left a lasting impact on me that it will, forever be my favorite Star Trek no matter what else comes out after this. And, but, and that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Excellent. Kevin, thank you so much. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
This
just
is
flown
fun.
by.
I mean, we kind of, this definitely went places I don't think any of us expected to go, but that's to me the most satisfying part about trying to unpack these episodes is that we learn more about each other even as we're just trying to talk about it, and it just makes the show more relevant.
Mm-hmm. You got it. Is there any other projects that you're working on that you want to tell the listeners about? We did talk about your new ornament series for the Mirror Universe that's coming.
No, I've got nothing to shamelessly self-promote right now. Dayton and I were just talking. We spent quite a bit of yesterday together. We went and saw Hobbs and Shaw.
Oh, nice.
Which was a lot of fun. We're going to go see the Rush documentary on Wednesday, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on Friday. So we're always talking about what we might want to do next, and but right now it's kind of stay tuned.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Right on. Where can people find you online if they want to?
I'm pretty easy to find. I'm Kevin Dilmore on Twitter. I'm Kevin Dilmore on Facebook. If you follow me on Facebook, you'll see pictures of my grandson and a lot of dumb jokes. You follow me on Twitter, you'll see me make angry political rants. So just pick your channel.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, talking about Star Trek The Next Generation is not all we've been doing on the network this week, so take a quick listen to this clip to see what else you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, The Ready Room.
Is this the supernatural Klingon episode? What is this going to be? And then it just turns out to go in and dig your own time crystals, State Park. I mean, it's like, okay.
Larry,
again,
you go in there and there's a basket type thing there, and you put in your 10 quatlus and you get 60 minutes to dig your time crystal.
Darsix. Yeah.
Yeah, actually the Klingons want Darsix, don't they?
Yeah.
And you go in, and actually however many time crystals you can dig in 60 minutes, you get to keep. But the catch is they're time crystals. So 60 minutes to one person is only a minute to someone else.
Literary Treks.
We have the conversation between Pike and the Starfleet Admiral Terrell about the specifics of why they were kept out of the war. This is even before we're in a situation where they have no choice but to stay out of the war. They couldn't go back if they wanted to. By sort of setting up the milestones in the story for this is about when this is happening during season 1. That allows us to tell our own independent story within that, but yet also you'll always know where you are in the regular TV show.
Earl Grey.
That question about whether life exists, either yes it does, because enough time has elapsed and there's enough planets out there, or no it doesn't, because we are that race.
Oh.
that seeds life elsewhere in the universe at some point.
The other
in the
answer
future.
is it did, but they all destroyed themselves, But that's also kind of unlikely that you'd have lots of civilizations all doing the same thing and destroying themselves, I think. But to the journey!
And the 7
That's all I could think about with that one.
This is the Seinfeld in Space episode. and keep waiting for Elaine to show up.
I'm trying to think of what Jerry Seinfeld would say in Jerry Seinfeld's tone of voice inside this episode. Can you do a good Jerry Seinfeld?
Oh, good grief, no. Not even close.
I'm trying to think how I would approach doing a Jerry Seinfeld impersonation. It's not coming to me. He's got that super high-pitched da-da-da-da-da kind of, I don't know, kind of voice.
Well, that you did really well, the da-da-da-da-da. So, yeah, there you go.
Why don't they just warp out of here?
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcast. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get all the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find your shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. There are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select Warp 5. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Patrick, where can people find you when you're not checking for rain?
When I'm not checking for rain, which has been happening a lot lately in my neighborhood, but when that's not happening, you can find me on the network with my good friend Amy Nelson over on The Edge. You can also find me on Twitter at MagicDrop5. There's no spaces. The 5 is a digit and not spelled out. And you can also find me on a new podcast coming out soon on the United Federation of Podcasts called Mickey's Marvels. I'm not sure where this fits into all the other recordings we've done, so in other places you will hear magical mutterings.
Is that a Harry Potter podcast?
Yes, you'll hear about a magical mutterings Harry Potter podcast that does not exist anymore, but it is going to be Mickey's Marvels, and that is with my good friend Chris Tribuzio. So, Brandon, where can people find you when you're not trying to find derelict ships that are from the future, in the past, in the future of another universe?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon Mutala. I'm here on the network with The Line, which is our podcast devoted to Star Trek Picard. You can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with my friends Chris and Tom. We talk about Alfred Hitchcock films once a month on Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. And also over on the United Federation of Podcast Network with my friend Zach Moore, and we cover all the films and sequels and remakes in the series, and we are currently smack dab in the middle of Terminator, because Terminator Dark Fate is coming out soon. At this time, we'd like to thank the wonderful associate producers of Warp 5. That's Norman C. Lau, Floyd Dorsey, Mike Morrison, Tim Cooper, Justin Ozer, Mark Flessa, Chris Tribuzio, and Jim McMahon. Thank you so much for supporting Warp 5 in particular and Trek FM on a whole.
If you'd like to help us keep all our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more. Available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great wheel. Easy for me to say. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
Listen, dude, you're not the only guy who's tired.
I'm the only guy who's midnight for.
Yes, it's well, I've been up since 2 o'clock my time. And
Why?
It's now 10 o'clock my time. I couldn't sleep last night, so I just woke up, and so I listened to an audio commentary for Terminator 3, and then I got ready for work, and then...
Is that why you did the associate producers before the patron this time?
Because I'm tired. I don't know what's going on.
I thought it was senioritis.
No, senioritis. Something like that. Anyways, until next time, don't be afraid of the pillow.
I'm not.